All right, welcome back to ABA exam review and the continuation of our BCBA practice exam series, where we're going through another set of questions together and breaking them down. If you're new to the channel, welcome. If you're turning, welcome back. Please like, subscribe, and share. Check out behavioranalyststudy.com for all of our study materials. When you pass your exam, let us know so we can include you in the Sunday shout out. Work hard, study hard. Let's get going. Brian is conducting a 6-month study to decrease tantrums in a 4-year-old child. Over the course of the study, the child's tantrums decrease significantly, but Brian notices that the child has also naturally improved their self-regulation skills as they have grown older. Which threat to internal validity might explain this change? When we talk about threats to internal validity, what do we mean? Well, we mean, what are some variables or situations that can threaten us and our intervention controlling the behavior change or the dependent variable? Internal validity says we're establishing some sort of functional relationship. In this case, we have a 6-month study, which is a lengthy study, with a 4-year-old child. Now, over the course of the study, the tantrums do go down, but the child has also naturally, as they've gotten older, improved self-regulation. So the threat here is this idea that just getting older has improved self-regulation. What would we call that? Getting older, and therefore the skills changing just as a side effect of getting older. A, history. When we talk about history in terms of internal validity and threats, we're talking about learning history and history with maybe other interventions or other therapies. Not necessarily growing older, just what happened in the client's past. Instrumentation has to do with how we're measuring the outcome, and there's no indication that measurement changed at any point or was wrong at any point. Maturation is what we're discussing here, right? As the client or as the child matures, naturally their skills change. And so the threat here is maturation over 6 months has affected the outcome of the study. And then experimental bias, if we have any sort of biases in play, which again, there's no information indicating that bias exists here. The main threat based on this information, the client getting older or maturation. You're working with the child who has limited verbal skills. During sessions, you start by modeling simple sounds like ba or da and reinforce the child only when the vocal imitation closely matches the modeled sound. After consistent success with single sounds, you introduce more complex syllable combinations and extend the time before reinforcement is delivered. What is the primary focus of this intervention? What are you trying to accomplish here? What does it look like we are trying to do with this child? What do we know so far? We know verbal skills are limited. So you model very simple sounds and reinforce when they echo you. So when the imitation matches, you reinforce. So you're clearly teaching some sort of echoic or using some sort of echoic training. Single sounds are successful. We now get into more complex combinations and extend reinforcement. So we're just trying to get the child to imitate our language. And if we're trying to do that with a child with limited verbal skills, what are we trying to accomplish? A, teaching the child to eventually demand for items that they want or need. Well, based on this information, we're a long way from MANS. Right now, we're strictly echoic training. We're not even manipulating MOs or attempting to identify MOs yet. So A seems way off from what the goal is currently. B, establishing a way for the child to functionally communicate through picture cards. Nowhere in the question do they mention picture cards. So this is one of those answer choices. If you've done your work in the question and you know what the question has given you, B is not even close to being possible answer choice. C, strengthen the child's ability to identify nonverbal stimuli. Same as B. C, we don't talk about nonverbal stimuli here. We're simply echoic training. So D, develop vocal imitation skills to establish a basis for other verbal operants. Yes, we know the client is limited verbally. We're just trying to get them to make some sounds, trying to evoke some echoics, and trying to get a base for other verbal operants. So our primary focus here is going to be D. After a functional behavior assessment, the behavior analyst determines that the function of a child's aggression is to gain access to tangible items. The analyst decides to teach the child how to request access to preferred activities. Which of the following considerations should the analyst most prioritize when selecting the socially valid alternative behavior? All right, this is a good question that reminds us to pick the best answer choice available. We want to pick the answer where the analyst should most prioritize when picking a socially valid alternative behavior. And what are we picking an alternative for? Well, aggression for access to tangible items. So the analyst wants to teach a request to access to preferred activities. And if they want to make this socially valid, what should they do? What is the consideration they should prioritize? A, the replacement behavior must ideally be easier for the child to perform than the aggressive behavior. This is true. Ideally, you want replacement behaviors that require less response effort or that are easier done than the other behavior. Because if they are harder, then the motivation to do the harder behavior might be decreased. So if we can get an easier replacement, that's great. What about B? The replacement behavior should require more effort than the problem behavior to discourage it. That's really not ideally what we're going to prioritize, picking something harder to engage in, right? We're trying to go the opposite way. C, the replacement behavior should be socially acceptable, but only occasionally reinforced. Socially acceptable is ideal, but we're going to reinforce it more than occasionally, especially when we're just teaching under replacement. So C is inaccurate. D, the replacement behavior must be taught in isolation without addressing the maintaining contingencies of the problem behavior. In other words, we don't want to address the natural environment's effect on behavior. We're just going to teach behavior in isolation, which of course is not a good idea because we are applied, right? It matters that we teach behavior that can work in the real world. And D doesn't necessarily translate to the real world in this context and how it's written. So if we're going to prioritize when selecting the most socially valid alternative behavior, A looks like it's going to be the best choice based on the answers given. The behavior must be ideally easier for the child to perform than the aggressive behavior. A multiple baseline design is used to assess the impact of an intervention on reducing aggression, property destruction, and self-injury. The intervention is applied sequentially, and data are collected before and after the intervention is implemented. Which of the following best describes a key feature of this single case experimental design? This question is essentially just saying, what's a key feature of a single case experimental design? Why do we in ABA choose single case experimental designs? Well, for several reasons. Let's look at, based on what we know here, we have a multiple baseline design. We're going to look at different behaviors, aggression, destruction, self-injury, and collect data sequentially over and over again. Based on all this, what best describes the key feature of the design? A, the intervention is tested on multiple participants simultaneously. If we're going to test multiple participants simultaneously, that is often associated with a group design. With the single subject design, single case design, each subject is their own control, and they're typically much smaller experiments. B, the design relies on group comparisons and statistical analyses. Again, this is more of a group design. Statistical analyses is associated with group designs, as are group comparisons. C, the design relies on repeated measures. One of the great things about single case experimental designs is we can repeat the measure over and over again, and we should. We want enough baseline data. We want enough intervention data. Single case experimental designs are really highlighted on the idea of repeated measures. And then D, the behaviors are measured intermittently rather than repeatedly. Not the case in multiple baseline designs. We are continuously measuring every single instance. So of the following, what's a key feature? Well, the design relies on repeated measures. A behavior analyst wants to collect data on how often a student is off task during a 30-minute math class. The analyst decides to observe the student at the end of every 5-minute interval to record whether the student is on task or off task. What type of discontinuous measurement procedure is the analyst using? All right, so we know we have a discontinuous measurement procedure. So it's going to be some sort of interval or time sampling. So now we just have to identify which one is it. We know we have a 30-minute math class. We break it into 5-minute intervals, and we're looking at the end of each interval. So what type of discontinuous measurement procedure do we measure occurrence at the end of intervals? Is it partial interval recording, whole interval recording, frequency recording, or momentary time sampling? Well, you know it isn't frequency recording because frequency recording is continuous, not discontinuous. It's not going to be partial or whole because with partial and whole interval, we've got to look at the entire interval. Therefore, it has to be momentary time sampling. With momentary time sampling, we are measuring behavior at the end of each interval. Is it occurring? Is it not? Thanks so much for watching. Please like, subscribe, and share. Check out behavioranalyststudy.com for all of our study materials. When you pass your exam, let us know so we can include you in the Sunday shout out. Work hard, study hard. We'll see you soon.